Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of 3D Design, brought to you by the Corona Public Library's Maker Exchange. As always, I'm Mr. Martin, and today I'm showing you some tips and tricks for covering those common printing mistakes. Let's get started. First off, we're going to learn how to fix those pesky overhangs. Now, this is something that you've heard me talk about many times on this channel, and today we're finally going to learn how to fix them. Now, if I were to print these two objects as is, they would print just fine. But as soon as we start creating an overhang, we're going to have some problems, especially one that is this steep. So first, I'm just going to combine them, create that hole, and then add in another box and create another hole. And you'll notice that I have a very steep overhang here. Well, luckily for us, there's a very simple way of solving this. If we were to add what we call some sacrificial supports, then it becomes possible to print this from the ground up without having the overhang droop down on us while printing. So a lot of it does depend on the orientation that it ends up printing, but luckily when the software slices this, it should be smart enough to recognize just what the goal is here. So what we can do is add in one little overhang at a time, simply copy and paste them and move them over with your keyboard keys, and you have a nice, wonderful little printable overhang piece. This next tip actually helps us solve an issue that we ran into when trying to print one of our recent prints. You might recognize this object that we created earlier. Now, with sharp corners, in order to stop them from coming off of the build plate while printing, you can add larger contact points. So here we're just going to add some little pads to the corners. And once we add them on all corners, we can be sure that we have essentially what comes down to a stronger grip on the build plate. As the material cools, it'll make sure that when we print the higher layers, we're not going to be warping and coming off of the build plate as it cools. Very important. Now this next tip is a little bit more advanced, but still very useful for avoiding some common headaches. If I were to print this hammer as is, well, the layers are going to start from the bottom up. And you'll notice that if I were to smash this against a different object, well, those layers are going to want to separate. They're stacked against each other from the ground up here, and so if we were to smack this hammer against something else, well, the layers are going to split apart and break. It's not as strong. So what we can do to overcome this is lay the hammer down flat. This way, the layers will be stacked. They're still stacked vertically, but they're printed horizontally now. So you do get a bit more added strength. It's less likely for this hammer to divide right down the middle than it is to actually break off in this case. The bottom portion where you'd grab it is connected directly to the top portion, and they're all the same layer, just stacked one on top of each other. Lastly, we have a bonus 2-in-1 tip. Now, if you're trying to create a box or something hollow to then add more material to, well, there's two ways you can do it. You can simply add in another object to create the hole, or you can copy paste, hold shift down, and simply create an object that has the same aspect ratio, just a different scale. You can then adjust whatever axis you're trying to adjust here, in this case the vertical one, and align them, but of course first make sure to create the hole so that the TinkerCAD or whatever software you're using knows to actually extract that material. I'm just going to make this a little taller here so that we can be sure that we're cutting all the way through, and when we group it we have our nice box. Now that's great, however we want complete control over how thick these walls are. To be specific, we want them to be a multiple of whatever our extruder is printing. So in this case, if we're making a 2mm wide base layer, then we're going to want our wall to be a multiple of 2mm. So in this case, it would either be 2, 4, 6, 8. You get the picture. Now, when creating it, you also have to think about how much material you're using. Is it worth it to create a 6mm wall when a 4mm wall will do? In this case, we're going to leave it at 4mm. And now that you have that, you can simply copy paste using Control-C or Control-V and simply creating a box one wall at a time. Now TinkerCAD does make it easy. Things tend to snap according to whatever your snap grid is set to, and it rotates fairly easy as well. In this case, we still have a box, but now we have a box with walls that are less likely to create issues when slicing due to varying wall lengths or thicknesses. And from here, we can always add more pieces to the middle. In this case, we're just going to create a little window frame. These, again, it's nice to have these inside walls be a multiple of the base layer as well, but it's not necessary. And last final quick tip, if you ever are adjusting objects and they get hidden behind others, don't forget that as long as you have it selected, you can use our keyboard keys to move it on over. As always, hope you've learned a thing or two from watching this, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.